It was supposed to be just another babysitting job, a quiet house, 2 sleeping kids, and a peaceful night. But then, the intercom buzzed. A whisper on the other end, breathing. And then, footsteps inside the house. I wasn't alone. What happened next still keeps me up at night. And if you think you're brave enough to hear it, think again. I was 20 when this happened. I used to babysit for 2 families, one regularly during the week and another, a wealthy family, on weekends. The weekend gig was particularly sweet. They had a mansion-like house, a private pond, a separate garage, and a pool house with an intercom that connected to the main house. That particular fall weekend was like any other. I arrived Friday evening, played with the kids, James 7 and Jessica 5, and put them to bed by 8:30 p.m. Afterward, I made my way to the pool house, excited to have some alone time. I FaceTimed friends, watched a movie, and relaxed. About an hour in, the intercom buzzed. The sudden noise startled me. I pressed the button. "Jessica?" I asked. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I keep hearing noises." This wasn't normal. Jessica usually slept through the night. Trying to stay calm, I told her I'd be right there. I hurried across the yard, punched in the security code, and entered the house. Jessica was already in bed when I arrived. "It's okay, sweetie," I whispered, tucking her in. "Just the house settling." She nodded, though her eyes still darted around nervously. After reassuring her, I stepped back into the hallway. That's when I heard it. A soft creak, like a footstep on wood. I froze. I was alone in the hallway. Yet I swore I heard movement. I told myself it was my imagination, maybe the wind outside. But as I reached for a wine opener in the kitchen, another sound came, a distinct shuffle, this time from the living room. I didn't dare look. My hands trembled as I abandoned the wine and rushed back across the property to the pool house, locking the door behind me. I resumed my movie, trying to convince myself I was overreacting. Then the intercom rang again. I jumped, staring at it. Slowly, I reached out and pressed the button. Silence. A deep breath. And then, breathing. Someone was on the other end. "Jessica," I whispered. No response, just steady breathing. My stomach dropped. I repeated Jessica's and James's names, growing more desperate. Still nothing. I called my best friend Kelsey, panicking. She brushed it off, saying I was just scared because of the movie. But as I stared out the pool house window, I noticed something horrifying. The hallway lights in the main house flicked on. A shadow moved across the window. I dropped my phone and let out a strangled scream. Someone was inside. Someone was walking through the house. I grabbed the intercom, my fingers shaking. "I'm calling the police," I screamed into the mic. No response. Then, from the house intercom, a child's scream. "Jessica." My blood ran cold. Without thinking, I bolted out of the pool house, sprinting toward the mansion. I yanked open the door, heart pounding. "Jessica!" I yelled. "James!" Jessica came running from her bedroom, tears streaming down her face. "There's a man!" she sobbed. "Where's your brother?" She grabbed my hand, leading me toward James's room. That's when I heard heavy footsteps from the stairs. Whoever was in the house had heard us. We snatched James and ran, my body fueled by pure terror. I didn't look back. I just ran across the yard with both kids in tow. We hid in the pool, house locking the door. Jessica and James sobbed as I whispered to the 911 operator, pleading for help. The longest 10 minutes of my life passed. Then flashlights, police. They found him in the house, a man, dirty, malnourished, in his 60s with a twisted face that sent shivers down my spine. I never babysat for that family again. But sometimes when I close my eyes, I still see his face staring back at me from the hallway window. A solo camping trip. Just me, my dog, and the quiet wilderness. But the forest wasn't empty. First, I saw them, watching from the trees. Then, the whistling started. Then, the footsteps. And finally, the whisper, just outside my tent. Not yet. What happened that night still haunts me, and if you think the woods are empty at night, think again. I was 28 when I decided to go solo camping with my beagle Reggie. It wasn't my first time camping alone, but something about this trip felt different from the start. The air was still, the forest eerily silent as I hiked deep into the woods. I found the perfect spot, by a lake with a clearing large enough for my tent and a fire pit. As I set up camp, Reggie kept his nose to the ground, sniffing aggressively around the perimeter. His behavior put me on edge, but I told myself he was just adjusting to the sense of the wilderness. I spent the afternoon fishing and preparing for the night. The whole time I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. I kept glancing toward the tree line, expecting to see a bear or a deer, but there was nothing. Then, across the lake, I saw them. Two figures stood just at the edge of the trees. From the distance, I couldn't make out their faces, but they stood perfectly still watching. My stomach twisted. I raised my hand in an awkward wave. They didn't move. I turned back to my gear, trying to ignore them. But when I looked up again, they were gone. I convinced myself it was nothing. Maybe hikers passing through, but a deep unease had settled in my gut. When I returned to my tent, I found it unzipped. I knew I had zipped it. Reggie growled low. In his throat, his ears flattened, eyes locked on the darkening woods. I scanned my belongings. Nothing was missing, but someone, or something, had been here. I debated leaving, but pride kept me in place. Instead, I decided to move my camp deeper into the woods, further from the lake. I packed up, relocated about a mile west, and rebuilt my fire pit. As night fell, Reggie remained tense. He sat beside me, facing the trees, ears twitching at every little noise. Then I heard it. A whistle. It came from deep in the forest, a long, high-pitched note. Not a bird, not the wind, a human whistle. I held my breath listening. Another whistle, closer. I grabbed my flashlight and shined it toward the trees. Nothing, just dense blackness beyond the glow of my fire. Then came the clicking, a rhythmic, tick-tick sound, like someone was tapping their tongue against the roof of their mouth. Reggie's fur bristled. He let out a deep, guttural growl, one I'd never heard from him before. Then, footsteps, slow, deliberate crunches on the forest floor. I turned off my lantern and held my breath. The footsteps grew closer. I gripped my knife. My mind raced. Could it be an animal? A person? My heart pounded so hard I swore it would give me away. The footsteps stopped just beyond the firelight. Then the zipper of my tent twitched. I nearly dropped my knife. "Who's there?" I called, forcing my voice to sound firm. Silence. Then a whisper so faint I barely caught it. "Not yet." Ice ran through my veins. I shot to my feet, shining my flashlight into the trees. Nothing. Reggie barked furiously, lunging toward the darkness. I spun in circles, scanning for movement. The woods were empty. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the fire with my knife and flashlight, staring into the trees. Every so often I thought I saw movement, just beyond my vision, lurking in the shadows. At dawn, I packed up. I wasn't waiting to see what else the forest had in store, but as I loaded my gear into my truck, I saw something on the ground. Footprints, barefoot, leading away from my campsite. I followed them a few yards before stopping abruptly. The footprints didn't lead away. They circled my tent over and over again, and beside them, carved into a tree, were 3 simple words: "Come back soon." Never did, and sometimes when the night is quiet, I still hear the whistle.